Hello and welcome to blockchaingamer.biz's Newsly Week Roundup. Today is Friday, the 27th of June. I am Jenny Jordan and with me is John Jordan. Hi John, how are you doing this week?
Yeah, good.
Good. Wearing your Games TX cap. I'm wearing eFrontier because there's it's quite exciting. Our son's still playing away, getting trashed. Not only, but and now they have this exciting sort of window where using someone's referral code you can get in and try the game for free. So otherwise you would have to it's required to have this pass to play.
Yeah.
So anyway, go and try that out if you haven't.
The next 10 days, I think it's live for. Otherwise you have to pay. They do have a sort of a live sort of raffle you can get in, but otherwise you have to pay $30 to get like the first entry level pass. So it's
Good. Right, we're going to kick off with some news. I'm sure you have lots to say about this one. Animoca Brands and Moca Foundation, Moca Network or Mocaverse, have announced a new blockchain, a layer 1 blockchain, Moca Chain. So have in, John.
I mean, I think you can approach this from two sort of directions. I mean, one is sort of the more cynical one, which is like, of course, this was going to happen. So it was a year ago, actually, that Animoca announced its sort of Mocaverse. So that was the release of, sort of, actually, it's probably the last big release of a sort of NFT PFP collection, what we used to call PFP collections, where you basically just buy like some artwork, 10,000 sort of random artworks. That was sort of done. And at the time, it sort of seemed like, there wasn't like a vast amount of thought behind it, but, maybe I was not paying attention. But they sort of said, we've got a lot of these sort of companies that we've invested in or are sort of partners with, and there's no good way for them to sort of coordinate. They can't keep sort of, talking to Animoca to say, can we do these sort of collaborations? And so, I think the idea for that was if we launch these sort of PFP and NFTs, and then companies could sort of use that as a sort of an ID system, and people who have these Mocaverse NFTs could get sort of could get access to games, or it'd be like an access pass sort of thing. And and from a sort of coordination point of view, that's quite a good thing. Blockchain is quite good for that. So it is, one of the things about blockchain, or you sometimes get that in non-blockchain, platforms as well. Is if it allows people to sort of build on top of it. So that's sort of quite a good thing. And then very quickly they launched a token. So you had the Moca token, which has been live again for a year, and people could just buy it. They did a pre-sale. But if you had one of these Moca NFTs, you also got an allocation of the tokens. And again, I don't know how much at the time behind the scenes they were thinking about sort of the future of the project, or for me, it just sort of seemed like that was the sort of thing people did. They did NFTs, and then they did sort of a token. So, games like, Pirate Nation were doing sort of a similar thing. And it didn't seem really to me that Animoca had too much thought about what they were doing, but I guess they would have had some idea about what could have happened. And they raised like $20 million for this, and then they create, obviously, do a token. You have a foundation that does that. So I think they also are being sort of over the year sort of positioning it away from being an Animoca thing. So when the NFTs came out, they were very much, it was done by the Animoca people. It was an Animoca brand sort of NFT collection, and then with the token you get the foundation, and then obviously that has to be sort of legally seen to be sort of separate in some ways. And they raised the money for the foundation, so obviously it's still sort of close to Animoca, but in some ways sort of separate as well. So over time, I guess they've sort of tried to work out what they want to do with what could have been just a PFP collection. And they've always had this thing, and Yat, the chairman, founder of Animoca, has always had this thing about sort of privacy and owning your own sort of digital property rights, and it's always been something that he's sort of really sort of pushed in various different ways. so since the sort of the token launch and the NFTs went live, I have occasionally sort of interacted with the sort of what I would still call the Mocaverse. So they did some collaborations with some games. So one of the games I played was Nine Chronicles, and Nine Chronicles did a special Mocaverse map, and you could get special Mocaverse items in the game if you played it. And then if you, you could also get some Mocaverse. They sort of had an XP system as well as this sort of token. So at one point it was sort of quite a social farming sort of environment, I think, for Mocaverse, where people who didn't have the NFTs could sort of get some tokens by sort of doing the usual jumping through various sort of hoops, playing games or tweeting stuff out. That seems to have gone away a little bit, really, in the last sort of 6 months. But they have still had this big push about, Moca, and they stopped calling it the Mocaverse and started calling it the Moca Network. I guess that was probably the signal behind the scenes that they were thinking something beyond what they maybe initially were. And when we were writing about it, we'd often go, I was old fashioned calling it the Mocaverse, and you were more like the Moca Network, or it was sort of an interesting change of tone, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, they have always been pushing ID, and they have been sort of creating these sort of ID systems and doing press releases. They did a deal with OneFootball and done a deal with the Sony blockchain, and they have this anime sort of network they're doing as well. And often you sort of think, are these just press releases? And often in our line of work, there's a lot of press releases, and you sort of go, well, that's just the press release. Is hard to judge if anyone's doing anything about it or if it's going to, mean anything. And that was sort of my feeling on these ones. They did one with SK Planet as well in South Korea. It was a really big sort of South Korean telecom. And it's sort of hard to know, are any of these non-crypto people actually going to know anything about this crypto network? Anyway, they have spent a lot of time supposedly sort of building out this sort of ID system. They call it ID system, reputation system. And that's now ended up with what they call the Moca Chain, which is, I think in blockchain terms, fairly sort of standard. So it's EVM, obviously Ethereum compatible. It's its own L1. It's pretty heavy on things like zero knowledge proofs. So that's a way that you can ask me to prove something, and I can. This is a very bad way of explaining it. You could ask me to prove that I know the answer to a question, and I can prove that without sort of telling you anything, without actually giving you the answer. But so that's a way of me of you saying, are you sort of KYC'd or something, or I need you to prove your ID, and instead of me showing you my passport and my driving license, I can do a proof that I have that, but you don't get to see the information behind it. So it's quite a powerful sort of cryptographic sort of system, and that's becoming quite prominent now. So it plays into all that sort of stuff. So the idea is, I mean, say it probably wouldn't work for this governmental thing, but if I wanted to get a visa to America, I could sort of prove that I should be able to get a visa to America. The American government would check the proof of that, but it wouldn't necessarily get to see my passport. In that case, that's a bad example because they would want to see my passport, I suppose. But for applying for a job or something, or there's things where you don't necessarily want your private information to be released to people. Those people just need to know that you fulfill their criteria. I guess an obvious one at the moment might be something like getting a mortgage or something like that. So there's interesting things around that, and that's really where Moca Chain is now, taking the whole Mocaverse, Moca Network, Moca Yats vision, so that sort of makes sense from that point of view. I guess my view on it is sort of all blockchains have some of these elements, so they may not have the exact way. I assume Moca Chain is set up in some way to do this in a very specific format. So they have this thing called AirKit, which is the sort of the way in which they package it all up. And I guess that's the sort of the interesting bit is not so much the blockchain bit, which I think is now fairly sort of commoditized, but it's how, say, if I wanted to, I mean, they talk about education and financial services and stuff. And another thing that Animoca is heavily involved with is blockchain for education. They've got their own education blockchain sort of thing as well. So you can imagine those things being useful, sort of students using their credentials, but not necessarily wishing to give out all their details. from a sort of a vision point of view, that makes sense. But how to get people to actually use it so it is functionally useful, and this blockchain is being used, and sort of to replace some sort of Web 2 plumbing system. That's the thing, that's not very clear to me, and why, and why should that be clear to me? I've not really looked into it. So that's the sort of, and I think with that we're sort of in that situation with lots of blockchains now. The fundamental infrastructure sort of works fairly well, much better than obviously than it has done. It's always getting better, but it's the actual use cases. So what's the actual utility? What are people actually using these things for? And for games, we can argue, the toss about that sort of stuff. But in the real world, obviously, people are you actually be using it for real things, not for games. So I guess that's my really lack of understanding on the Moca chain is that likely to be used. Obviously, in the background as well, Animoca's doing it's going to be IPOing in the States. We assume at some point. So obviously the timing's just great if you're doing financial stuff like that, and to say we've got our own blockchain, as we sort of have always argued, if you can have a token attached to a blockchain, it's going to be worth potentially much more than a token attached to an app or a game or something like that. So I guess it's one of those ones where we have to wait and see exactly if people are using it.
I do recall Sue is saying that Animoca basically started building the things they realized no one else was doing, the things that were needed, and they spotted sort of were needed in the market, but in the Web3 market, but no one else was sort of doing. So from that sense, I don't think it's just another L1 blockchain for no reason. I think it's definitely deep intention there, and it's sort of with Animoca, you just think that they will educate us and the wider sort of wider sector about the purpose of it. So
I think so. I hope so. I mean, I don't, I obviously had Yat on the podcast and knows the Animoca guys sort of fairly well. I think one of the problems, and it's not just with them, but with lots of blockchain stuff, is I think that there is still a attitude of we will build it and they will come. So that's sort of we will build a way of having decentralized finance, and people will magically flock towards this new fantastic thing that we've built. And I would say not just blockchain, but for all technology, that's really not the case. You have to build something in a way that is 10 times better than what's there in the past, and then you still have to market it to people to get them to use it, because people are just have inertia in certain ways of doing things. So I think that's I think that's Animoca, because it is so sort of diverse and has all these investments. We have the blockchain hasn't really been sort of a useful coordination system for those things, because you also need to coordinate. I think we always underestimate. You need to coordinate these companies who want to collaborate to do that collaboration. So I think you just need the blockchain will take you so far, and then I think you need a super organized, experienced sort of team of people to onboard companies who might want to use this sort of privacy free. And the other thing about privacy is it's sort of like people talk about it a lot, and Facebook's made trillions of dollars based off the fact that we were posting our coffee snaps every day, and they built a big network they could do advertising to. Shouldn't we have some of that money? But when you look into those sort of things, the amount of money that any one individual would get through sharing their data is minuscule, unless you're a billionaire, and obviously then people really want to advertise expensive yachts to you. But for most of us in the world, if we'd got the money that Facebook had made from us, we would have got like £2.50 or something. It's just there's billions of people, so the money scales on to the big scale. On the individual level, we don't get very much. So that would be sort of be my fear. Is it's sort of like a really cool blockchain vision, but actually in the real world, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And the companies you're trying to plug into this system are really not very technically aware, and are quite happy with the really clunky way they're doing things, and in most cases it sort of works for them. So it's sort of hard to know how you can actually get people using this. It's sort of how everyone can sort of buy into this new vision. But
But if
we
you
will
do
see.
want to onboard maybe companies and institutions to crypto that would otherwise be a bit skeptical and not trust a lot of what's there, then you would go to someone like Animoca and probably trust that a bit more than just some name you've never heard of, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think that's totally right. If Animoca sort of said, you know, this is going to be, obviously education's a big thing for them, and this is going to be our other priority, and we're going to set up, a business unit with 250 people who are going to start onboarding, people to it. Then yeah, that's a totally different argument. Rolling up a blockchain that could do that and expecting people to sort of onboard themselves, that's sort of the bit where I sort of see potentially the gap. So I mean, I guess we'll find out a lot more when Animoca does do its IPO, and I guess we'll see then, is it just going to be saying we own all these billions of dollars of crypto assets and we don't really do very much with them. We just we just got in super early and bought tons of them and developed some stuff, and we are sort of like almost like a passive holder of these things. Or are they going to go, we're going to rate, when you do an IPO, you sell your shares, and so they're going to raise a couple of $1 billion. What are they going to do with that? Are they just going to buy Bitcoin like everyone else is sort of doing at the moment and have it as a passive treasury? Or are they going to go, right, we're going to actually, really address some of these problems? So I guess that'll be the point at which we'll get a better idea.
Now, talking of kind of identity layers and reputation systems, this is interesting because it kind of goes into a little bit our next headline story that we're talking about with MapleStory. Has a MapleStory N. They have introduced like a credit level system to tackle bots, which has been a big problem since its launch 3 weeks ago. They have seen. Is it 3 weeks ago? Sorry.
You keep saying 3 weeks. Every week you still say 3 weeks.
3 weeks, sorry, it's not 5 weeks.
15th of May it launched, so it's 6 weeks.
That's a lot. Sorry. It's a lot of projects to keep track on. It's showing some impressive user numbers, and it did that actually very quickly, but then it sort of transpired that quite a lot of these were bot accounts, and genuine players are not very happy with bots extracting from the game, and the developers have obviously realized this, and that some measures are in order. So they have now with this credit level system. So tell us more about that, please.
Yeah, so you get this with every MMORPG, or with every sort of big persistent sort of game, and even maybe some that aren't, but certainly with all these sort of style of games, whether they have crypto or not, you get people botting them, and it's I'm not sort of entirely sure exactly how much of a sort of fundamental issue this is. So some people are saying they've seen an individual player sort of tackle an end of, it's not an end of level boss, but tackle a big boss and defeat it on their own and get all the sort of loot. And those bosses are designed to be hard to beat by dozens of players playing. So that's what people have shown footage of that, and so there's some degree of assuming that's true. Nexon have sort of said that the game has not been hacked. So they're sort of suggesting that that's not been the case. So I don't know between that. They have sort of said that they're sort of hacking, so actually hacking the game and getting it to do what you want. And then they're sort of using what we call sort of macros, which is basically automated things. So we're using the term bot accounts in a very loose way. But obviously there's things you can do in the game that if you had an automated bot doing it, you could do it much quicker than a human player could do, and obviously you could do it 24/7 because it doesn't have to go to sleep. So there's sort of different elements there, and I think mainly the focus is on botting rather than people actually hacking the game. Although presumably people are looking to hack games because that's what people do for fun as well. And certainly if there's a game where there's real value in there, then that's going to make sort of more sense to do. So they have these sort of basic problems. Happens in all of these sort of games, blockchain in particular. And to be fair to Nexon. And their Web3 arm, Nextpace, they have, early in the first couple of weeks, they did say, we have these sort of these security measures, and we I think in the first 2 weeks they said one day they'd banned like 6,000 accounts. So they know this is going to happen. They're not being like massively surprised. They've been running these sort of games for 30 years, so they're well aware of it. I think maybe they're a bit surprised at the velocity of what's been happening. So one of the issues is they've been back. I think they obviously if I just make a bot and it just plays the game 24/7, 365 days a year, then that's quite easy to spot. That's a bot account, so it's quite easy to ban. I think one of the issues has been that once they've banned accounts, then people just go and make another account. So obviously it's a free to play game. So that's sort of one of the issues is they're quite good at finding these accounts and banning them, but the people just go off and make another account. So that's one of the things they're trying to deal with. The other thing is obviously why people are doing this is they're playing the game, they're getting all these items, then they're trying to sell them in the marketplace to get the in-game sort of asset, which is called NEOS or NESO anyway. And then you can convert that to the cryptocurrency, the NXPC token on the Avalanche blockchain, and then you have to transfer that token from the Hennessy blockchain to the Avalanche blockchain. Then you can cash it out. So that's sort of the flow of it. So in all those aspects, they've tried to put some friction in there. So they have this, as you say, new thing called credit levels. So it's a bit more complicated for existing wallets, but for now, if we went in and created a wallet, our wallet would be credit level 0, and that means we can interact with the marketplace because there's no way to sort of hack the marketplace. You'd be hacking the blockchain to do that. So they're quite happy to let people buy and sell things on the marketplace, but you can't play the game. So to play the game, you have to go to credit level 1. To do that, you have to hold 10 NXPC tokens, about $9 of value. So you need to. It's a sort of a one-off thing, and you have to hold $10, 10 tokens in your wallet in order to get access to the game. And if that drops below 10 tokens, then you can't get access anymore. So it's sort of like a deposit, I suppose. So it's like a security deposit, and I guess the idea there is for most players, because some players won't be able to do that because the crypto bit will be too complicated, I guess, or they won't have access. Kids won't have access maybe to that money. But for most people, like $10 to play a game is not ridiculous. But if I was running 100 accounts, then suddenly I've got $1,000. So it's not prohibitive, but it's sort of a sort of an issue. And so that gives me access to the game. There's a credit level 2. To that you go through a formal KYC system. So you prove your identity with an government issued ID card. As you say, they could be using Moca Chain in future. That would be an ideal sort of thing. So we'll see if Animoca can do a deal with them. And at that point, I don't need to hold anything I don't need to hold these 10 tokens in my wallet because I've proven who I am. Obviously, at any level, you can still be banned. It's not like a get out of jail card free. And obviously, if you were banned, if your KYC account had been banned, and then you went to make another account using your government whatever passport or ID, whatever, they wouldn't, you wouldn't be able to make an account then. So all this is sort of adding friction, and for all game developers, as I say, for these big games, it's sort of like, actually governments and fraud. There's no way you can get 0% fraud, but do you want 5% fraud or 7% fraud? And and sort of cracking down on fraud is one, expensive, and two, means you're going to catch some people who are probably not, they're not running hundreds of accounts, but maybe they're doing something sort of against the rules a little bit. But they don't feel like they're doing something really wrong because they're only running one account, or I'm only running 2 accounts. I'm only, and so you're banning them, and so it becomes sort of difficult. So I think what Nexon's sort of started out being quite loose, realizes it has to sort of tighten down a little bit, and sort of put these first proposals in. I guess we'll see what happens. But equally, the way to have no fraud in the game is basically to make everyone do a KYC with their passport, and then once they're banned, they can't get back in again. But then your game doesn't get enough players in for it to be fun for anyone. So it is a grey sort of problem that you have to sort of feel your way in. And I do kind of think that people always complain. People who are playing games always complain, and within reason, I think that's a good sign, because if people don't complain about your game, they don't care about your game. And so obviously you don't want everyone, you don't want 99% of people complaining, but you just know there's a noisy, very small minority in most cases that is complaining about these things. So we'll see. I mean, you can already see that the number of daily active unique wallets has dropped. So that's we saw a big spike actually, sort of 2 weeks ago, I think, and that was when Nexon was banning more wallets and people were then just creating more wallets. So we've seen that drop off, and we've seen a sort of a drop off of activity on the marketplace. It's not collapsed in any way, but sort of the growth has sort of plateaued out a little bit. So I think that would be what Nexon would sort of want to see. More fundamentally, the big issue is the token price is still going down. So that's not necessarily something they're massively in control of. I think they launched the token at too high a price, and they gave too much of it away. And once you have token once a token has sort of been dropping and hasn't hit the bottom and come up again, then people just assume it's going to keep going down, and there's a sort of an anti-speculative sort of sentiment around it. So probably that's nothing Nexon can do in and of itself to stop the token going down. There'll be a wider market change in sentiment at some point, but maybe not this year. I mean, that's sort of the problem. And it's not just Nexon. There's like the gun token from Gunzilla Games, exactly the same. Even the Moca token, despite the announcement yesterday, is still not, it's still it's not an all-time low, but it's not far off really. So that's affecting everything. But I think Nexon is sort of it seems a sensible approach to what they're doing, and they'll probably have to give it a couple of weeks to see.
Yeah, good. So another game we have covered quite frequently over the last couple of months is Wildcard from Playful Studios and the Thousands TV platform. And they've announced this week that Wildcard is now going to launch in October and is coming to Steam. They've always said that. Obviously that's the Web 2 version, because it's the Thousands is the Web 3 version. That's the way sort of to be able to launch on Steam. So I mean, already this game is looking really good. By October, it should be a success. Yeah. Do you have anything else to say about that?
So they originally said the sort of late summer, and so as they sort of joked, October isn't really late summer, so it's, it has been in playtesting for quite a while. So they've been regularly playtesting it. I don't think they're really changing much to the game at this stage. They will have had their plan sort of set out for the sort of launch schedule, and then what's going to happen in the sort of next 6 months in terms of new content. As you say, it is a totally Web 2 game, so there's no blockchain, nothing in there at all. But there is this Web 3 sort of wrapper, I suppose you could call it, the Thousands streaming platform that has the tokens and stuff like that. And it's not. I mean, that's being tested as well. I assume they sort of go live at the same time, but they may just put Wildcard live on its own just as a game as they sort of roll out Thousands. They haven't sort of seemed to have mentioned that. They've raised a bit more money as well, so I think that can now become sort of clear that money is sort of being raised to sort of give them some marketing for this game. I guess I think the game, will do well. I think it is that they know how to make good games, and you can never sort of tell exactly how the sentiment around a game will be. But I think it's definitely up there as a very credible novel sort of genre of game, sort of MOBA with character collection. Interesting in the sense it's 2v2, so there's not a single player mode. You have to partner up with someone else. So does that makes it maybe a little less exciting for people at the beginning, because you have to partner up with someone. Those games work well if me and you were playing together. We might not do very well because we're not very good at those sort of games, but we would sort of we would be able to sort of tell each other what to do, Whereas if you're just playing with a rando, then you can get a lot of sort of toxicity if you shout at the other one, you're doing really well and the other person's doing really badly. So we'll see how that plays out. I guess the biggest thing will be they're on Steam. They are a Web 2 game from a Web 3 ecosystem. So how much hate they will get from Steam, which is famously anti-blockchain, that will be the interesting thing. So it could be, I hope not, but it could be that they just get review bombed for this is a crypto grift, blah blah blah, destroying the planet, even though they're not. So they get tarred by sort of reputation, even though the game itself isn't. So we'll sort of just have to see how that plays out. I think more widely the games industry is sort of lacking interesting new stuff. So this game would sort of fit into that narrative if if people who like League of Legends and that sort of stuff sort of can overcome their sort of hatred of blockchain. So we'll have to see.
The problem so far has been that the Web3 games launching in Web2 versions on Steam haven't really been that good. So it will make a change that this is actually going to be, I assume, quite a good game. So that will be a big difference there. So
and I do think just thinking about I would like to play that game. I just don't think I'm probably going to play it very much, if at all. But it has been designed more for streamers. So the interesting thing will not be whether I am playing that game, because I just don't think I will be for many reasons. But will I be watching other players play it? I mean, it really is designed to be a spectator sport, and the whole point of Thousands is it's an interactive spectator sport. So that will be the interesting thing. And even when Thousands first, when Wildcard was first being tested like 2 years ago, and they had these funny actors, I suppose, who were sort of commentating on this thing. It was a bit sort of over the top sort of setup, but it was really good, and I watched all of them. And I don't watch streamed games at all. I never played League of Legends. Well, maybe once, but rubbish at those games. But the whole point of having really skillful players in teams, and I can see that that's much more sort of appealing to people, and so maybe the launch of Wildcard is less interesting than Wildcard and Thousands going, and then can they get people into Thousands?
Yeah. And clearly, that's a very long-term project as well, with kind of intentions of building this sustainability around the VC token and backed by the community and all that. So it's not one of those that are likely to rise up to fame and quickly drop off and never to be sort of heard about again. Anyway, let's move on. We've got US-based startup Spekter Games announcing this week that they raised $5 million. That's from the former he's the founder of N-Way Games, the Web3 studio that got acquired by Animoca last year, wasn't it? So raised $5 million, and also sort of unveiled their Telegram game, like a roguelite Web3 game, Spekter, what's it called? Spekter
Agency.
Yeah. So, yes, unveil a bit more there about the details around that.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of a sort of odd sequence, really. So, N-Way Games was just a normal Web2 game developer from over a decade ago. I knew them back in the day. They were specialised in making multiplayer mobile games. They did a whole bunch of Power Ranger games. Surprisingly enough, that did really. So Power Ranger was the IP, and they made these real time sort of fighting games that did super well. Really quite successful for that sort of niche. And as I say, Animoca bought them. They did some odd NFTs around the Olympics, Winter Olympics and stuff. For some reason, I guess, to test out what was going on. And then the big thing they were going to do was in 2023, actually, late 2023, was this thing called Rec League, which is these big mechs NFT. You built these big mechs from NFTs, and then you fought them. And there was a Web 2 version, a Web 3 version, and actually I had the CEO TK on the podcast talking about it. I got really excited about it. Bought a bunch of NFTs. So sort of nothing happened. The game did go live. I did some videos about it. It was a little bit clunky. I was terrible at it. No one cared less. And then sort of the next thing we heard was sort of TK had sort of, I think he'd gone. He became an advisor, but basically left the company. And then he went to advise someone else, didn't he, or something? I can't remember. But anyway, that was obviously basically what happens with normally when a company gets bought, the founders have to stay for a certain period of time, normally a year or a couple of years, to make sure the company's still working okay. And then as soon as they can, they've obviously probably got a bit of money from selling the company, and they go off and do something else. And that's exactly what he's done, which is fair enough, I suppose. But he's come back with this new thing. Spekter Games raised $5 million. They're doing so. The Spekter Agency is as you say, a roguelite game on Telegram. We've seen quite a lot of that sort of stuff. What they're sort of hoping, like everyone sort of hopes, is it's a typical sort of roguelike. So you're just running around, sort of. There's not a lot of skill involved, really. But they got a strong meta game, sort of meta game. So you're unlocking things, and they hope that sort of gives a bit more retention to Telegram games. Notoriously, get a lot of people in, and then they all go away again. Okay. So they're trying to, even on the Web 2 side, make it a sort of a stronger sort of feeling that you're sort of leveling up things. You're playing the game to get some resources, and then you're using that in an interesting way. And then using blockchain as another retention mechanic. So, token, I think is sort of the way that they're going. I don't know about NFTs or not. Obviously, one of the problems with Telegram at the moment is you have to use the TON blockchain. So that's not really what most people want to use, because Spekter, they've got a second game in development, and that's going to be a mobile game through the app stores, which is sort of what they know, or what TK knows more. So obviously, if you could do that also on TON, but there's just not, TON isn't, in the, it's a non-EVM compatible chain. It's, just you don't have a lot of people playing games, serious games on that. So I don't quite know how that sort of lines up. And it's just sort of, I've played a bit of Spekter Agency, so only the very lightweight version of it is live at the moment, without too much meta. I mean, it's really nicely done, as the look and feel of the game. It feels, it's not a sort of cheap sort of Telegram sort of knockoff like some of them are. But I still, from my own personal use, I just think Telegram is a very ephemeral sort of platform. And while I could imagine playing a game every day like I do with some mobile games, there's no reason why I couldn't do that technically. Just no one's got that to work yet, so that's quite a big ask. So I think this first game they've launched maybe just a little bit of a sort of experiment, and they actually what they're doing is this sort of second game, and we'll find out more about that. But it was it was just a sort of funny, the sort of background where I spoke to him so much about Rec League and got so sort of into it, and then it just like no one talked about Rec League anymore. Yeah. But then, funnily enough, actually this week, Tower Ecosystem, which is another Animoca brand thing, has launched it's called Rec League Versus, but it's not. It's a much more lightweight version of it, and they're doing that on Farcaster, which is an even more obscure sort of blockchain version of sort of Twitter, really, I suppose. The brand still lives there, but the big game, there's going to be a massive big push, has sort of gone by the wayside, which is
finite IPs and all that. Anyway,
yeah.
The Sandbox has announced, they haven't actually released any figures as far as I know, but up from their Alpha Season 5, which was headlined by the Jurassic Park. That was the overarching theme of that season. Now they are preparing for Season 6, and headlining that will be the big circus company, Cirque du Soleil, French circus.
Yeah.
So talk us through a little bit what's up with the Sandbox generally, and this kind of collaboration in particular.
Yeah, as you say, so Sandbox Alpha Season 4, I think, ended at the end of sort of December last year. Alpha Season 5 was January, sort of February, was it? I can't remember. Was it into March? I can't remember. I did play a bit of it. I bought some of the Jurassic Park stuff.
March into April.
Yeah, there was a nice British Museum experience that I really liked. But they just say they normally quite good at giving out figures. They didn't this time. I assume that means that the figures were not as high as they were in Alpha 4, because the Alpha 4 figures were quite high, and you don't want to be seen as going down. So a little bit suspicious there. And they pushed Season 4 pretty big, and there'd been a bigger gap between Season 4 and Season 3, whereas Season 5 happened quite quickly. I guess don't want to reiterate too much my views on the Sandbox, which is that they've just taken too long to get anything done. And then when I spoke to Sebastian Bourget, the COO, at the start of this year, he was saying they're going to do 4 big events this year, and they wanted it to get from Alpha to Beta. So that's going to be hopefully, it won't be Alpha Season 7, it will be Beta Season, I guess will they go to beta season 1? I don't know how they would do the timing. But they need to get this game out, and they need to get it into the beta. So this one, to me seems like a little bit like could this not have been the beta? But anyway, I mean, to some degree, they've got to go through the motions on this stuff, and obviously there's some technical reasons why they think it's still an alpha, not a beta. I don't know what that is. I mean, Cirque du Soleil, they're quite a big brand name. I mean, it's not really. I mean, they are a circus, but it's more like technical performance and spectacular and all this sort of stuff. So they're doing 2 events with them. So those are based on sort of the sort of event, the themed events that Cirque du Soleil has done in the past. And there's going to be the usual NFT sales and these assets that people who are building in the sandbox can then use these branded assets in their in their own experiences. I just kind of think with the sandbox they need to sort of get off the fence a little bit, and speed it up. And obviously it's not. I hope season Alpha 5 did really well for them, but they haven't released any numbers on it, so I assume it wasn't great. And I just kind of feel there's a little bit like, the sandbox has been massive when Metaverse was in, and it's not massive now. Maybe that's good. They just sort of can keep building, but I just get the, there is some nice stuff there. I mean, I have my Sandbox Daily channel, which I occasionally drip into and do some more videos, but I find it quite hard to be enthusiastic about it. And while there is good stuff there, we just know on Roblox they just have the biggest concurrent game in the world, Grow Your Garden. Our kids playing, and I can't remember what it is, like 20 million people play that game now. And it's the game itself is not good, but everyone has that virality. And until the sandbox can be persistently live and doing that sort of stuff, something wrong.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for listening in this week, and we'll see you all back next week. Bye bye.